In this video, I'm going to show you why Quasar Framework is amazing by showing you the entire front end of my Quasar app Fudget 2, which is both a mobile and a desktop app, which I'll be publishing to the iOS, Android, Mac and Windows app stores next year. You'll see how I've used tons of different Quasar components, including Dialog, InfiniteScroll, Date, Splitter, Table, QExpansionItem and the QParallax component, how I've used various Quasar directives, including the v.touchswipe directive, and how I've used various external libraries and plugins, including SortableJS and the Cordova Ionic Keyboard plugin. I'm going to need your help in this video, so please leave a comment below telling me which features or aspects of this app you would like to see a tutorial on, and I'll be making some videos about the most requested tutorials. Please consider subscribing and clicking the bell if you don't want to miss any videos like this. Let's start by diving into the mobile version of Fudget 2. So what is Fudget 2? Well, it's basically a budgeting app or a finance app which makes it really easy for you to manage your money and make sure you don't overspend. And it's a brand new version of my popular app Fudget, which is currently already available for iOS, Android, Mac and Windows, and which has had over 2 million downloads. And if you want to download that, then just search for Fudget, F-U-D-G-E-T, on the App Store on your device. This app, Fudget 2, is basically a huge improvement on that original app, and it's based on years of feedback from Fudget users, and I've tried to implement the most in-demand features from Fudget users. So in Fudget we can create budgets, and you can see the list of budgets here. So you might create a budget for a specific month, such as March or April, like you can see here, or you might create a budget for a specific project or event, such as a wedding. And if we tap on a budget, we open up that budget and we can see a list of entries. And each of these entries is either an income entry, like you can see in green here, or an expense entry, like the ones you can see in red. And we can always see the overall balance of all these income and expense entries down at the bottom here on the right. So Fudget is basically like a really easy to use Excel spreadsheet, which always tells you the balance of a bunch of different income and expense items. So let's find out what's going on this budgets page. So on this budgets page, we can see a list of each of our budgets, and each budget is basically made with a QCard component with horizontal QCard section components inside that QCard component to add these different sections: the budget name, the budget balance, this little chevron, and this edit button on the right. And this balance is basically the same balance that you would see at the bottom of the entries page down here. And the values don't match up here, but that's just because what you're seeing here is just the front end of the app and it's not yet fully functioning with real data. So we have this edit button over on the right, and if we tap on that, then we can see this dialog, and this is basically just a QDialog component. And then we have a couple of fields here. We have a field for the budget name, and this is just a QInput component, and a select field for the currency symbol. And this is just a QSelect component. And we have a bunch of different buttons here. And this is basically just a QTabs component, a bit like the main navigation you can see right at the bottom of the app. And if we tap on the OK button, it will close this dialog. And we actually have a shortcut to some of these options, which is by swiping left on a budget item like this. So if we swipe left, we can see some of those options here. And we can swipe right again to close that. And again, these options here are just a QTabs component. And this is not how you would typically expect to use a QTabs component, but it shows you that you can be quite creative with the Quasar components and use them in interesting ways. None of these buttons are actually doing anything at the moment, apart from this delete button. And if we tap on that, and again, we see another dialog, although this is actually using the dialog plugin and not the dialog component. And I'm actually using a composable function to make it really easy to display these dialogs using the dialog plugin and make sure they all have a consistent background color and button colors and all that good stuff. And I think I spoke about this in more detail in one of the previous videos in this series. And you'll see when I tap on delete that we see a nice little animation. as the budget is deleted, we see the item slide off to the left and we see the remaining budgets slide up to fill the gap that's left. So I'll just show you that now. I'll tap on delete and we see that nice little animation. And we can also reorder these items. And there's a couple of ways we can do that. And one way is just by tapping and holding on an item till it turns yellow and then just dragging it down or up. And you can see that there. So we can place these in any order that we want. And I'm doing this using the SortableJS plugin. And there is a SortableJS version specifically for Vue.js apps, but I had some issues with that. I found that it was clashing with Quasar's swipe left functionality, this functionality here, which is using the Quasar v-touch swipe directive. And so I'm actually just using the raw SortableJS plugin. So if you just jump to Google and search for SortableJS, then this is the plugin that I'm using for this functionality. And if you look down at the bottom here, we can see this all budgets balance, which basically shows the overall balance of all of these budgets combined. And you can see this balance update as I delete some budgets. So if I delete this April budget, you can see it now changes to a positive amount. And if we delete this March budget, we can see it's now down to 0 and it has this gray color. Okay, so if we want to add a new budget, we can just tap this Add Budget button. And again, we see a QDialog component pop down. So we can give this budget a name. So let's say we want to create a budget for the current month, which is November right now. So I'll just type in November and I'll choose dollar for the currency symbol. And we can choose to add starred items. And I'll tell you what starred items are in a little bit. And we can also add a carryover if we want, which will carry over the balance from a different budget. And then if we tap on create, we can see that budget has been added. And this should have been added at the bottom of the list there. So I think we have a little bug there, but no big deal. And we also have a menu drawer on this budgets page. If we tap this button at the top right here, and this will pop open this drawer. And I'm not actually using a QDraw component here, although I have hijacked all of the markup from the QDraw component. And the reason I've not just used a QDraw component is because I needed it to do some pretty funky stuff. So for example, on the desktop app, I needed these drawers to appear within these panes here, like this, instead of just completely over to the right or completely over to the left, which is what you usually get with a QDraw component. And we have a few options here. So this select multiple items option will make all these checkboxes appear on the left here, and we can select a bunch of budget items. And you can see this footer appear at the bottom here, and it tells us how many items we've selected, and it gives us the option to either move these items, export them to a CSV file, or just delete them all. And if you look up at the top here, you can also see this option to deselect all items, or to select all of the items. And you'll note that while we're in this multiple select mode, we can't tap on a budget to open it, and we can't tap to reorder items, and we can't swipe left to reveal options either. And if we just tap on done, then we get back out of this multiple select mode. And I'll just jump back to the drawer again. So we also have this reorder items option. And this gives us another way of reordering items. If we tap that, we see these little bars appear on the left, and we can just tap straight away to reorder these items. And the reason I've added this in is because a lot of people have emailed me and asked me how they can reorder items, because they've not managed to find this drag to reorder functionality. So I thought if I add an option in this drawer here, then the user is much more likely to find that and to be able to reorder their budgets. And also in the drawer, we have this show all budgets balance checkbox, which will allow us to show or hide the all budgets balance widget at the bottom. And we also have an add folder button where we can create a folder for storing budgets. Because I had a lot of users complaining that they ended up with tons of different budgets and they wanted a way to organize them into different folders. So I'll just create a folder here, and we can see that folder appear. And to open a folder, we can just tap it, and then we can continue to add more budgets to this folder. And if we want to open a budget, then all we need to do is tap on it. And this then brings us to what I call the entries page. So let's figure out what's going on this page next. Okay, so on this entries page, we have a list of all the entries within the current budget that we're looking at. And each entry is either an expense entry, like the ones that you can see in red, or an income entry, like the ones that you can see in green. And you can see that we're starting at the bottom of the list here, not at the top. You see we're right at the bottom. And I achieved this using the QInfiniteScroll component, which has a prop, the reverse prop, which you can add to make sure that you start at the bottom. And you might also use this component for something like a messaging app or something like that, where you always want to start at the bottom. So you can see that we can scroll all the way to the top. And each entry has a name or a category field, an amount field, a date field, and this edit button. And just like on the budgets page, we can swipe left on an item to reveal some options. In this case, we have the copy, paid, star, and delete options. And right now, the only options that do anything are the paid option. So if we tap that, we can see the item is marked as paid by adding this sort of faded out look and this strike through look. And the delete option, which will delete the item. And we see the same delete animation that we saw on the budgets page as well. And again, this swipe to reveal options functionality is done with the v touch swipe directive. And right down at the bottom here, we can see this balance area. And on the right hand side, we can see the overall balance of all of these income and expense items summed together. And then over on the left, we can see individual balances for all of the income items, all of the expense items, and all of the items which have been marked as paid. And I did have a little bit of a problem with this balance widget, which is what happens if these values get too long. So for most users, this is not going to be a problem, but for super rich people, this might be an issue. So if I just add an income item here, I'll just give it a name, monies. And if we give this a value of 999,999, and we OK that, we can see that the values in this budget area get quite long. And the values on this side are actually a little bit too long and they're getting obscured. And the way I solved this problem is by using Quasar's QSplitter component. So you can see this little line in the middle. Well, we can drag that to the right or drag it to the left so that we can see the whole of the balance area or the whole of this income, expenses, and paid area. So we can drag this left and right, or we can also just tap on this side to see all of this side, or we can tap on this side to see all of the balance area. So that's using the QSplitter component, super handy component for situations like this. Okay, so let's have a look at these entry items in more detail. So first of all, we have the name or category field, and this is basically just a text area. And if we tap on that, you can see that all the text in that field is selected to make it easy for the user to just type in a new name. And I've basically added this select all functionality by using a custom directive, which is added to the text area. And I had a pretty annoying issue with these fields, which was when we tap one of these fields, which is right near the bottom, such as this one here, I would tap it and the virtual keyboard would appear, but this field would be down below the keyboard like that. So to fix this, I used the Cordova Ionic Keyboard plugin. I'll just search for that, Cordova Ionic Keyboard. And we can see that plugin here. So I had to use this plugin to listen out for the keyboard will show event, which is an event which will fire when the virtual keyboard is about to be shown. And then within this event, I had to grab the height of the keyboard and then grab the currently focused field, such as this field here, and figure out if this field is going to be obscured by the keyboard. And if so, then just scroll the view down a little bit so that the field is no longer obscured. So that's the name or category field. And next we have the amount field, and this is a little bit different. You can see that when we tap on the amount field, we don't see the virtual keyboard. We see this pop-up numeric keypad with calculator buttons instead. So we're not actually focusing this input here. I'm just adding a class to it and this little flashing arrow thing to make it look like it's focused. But we're not actually really focusing this input element here, because whenever you focus an input element on mobile, the virtual keyboard will be displayed, and there's no way to avoid that as far as I know. So on Fudget 1, when we tap on this field, we do just see the standard virtual keyboard, but a lot of users complained about this and said that they would prefer to see a proper numeric keyboard, which is why I've added this keyboard here. And I thought I might as well add some calculator buttons as well, so that the user can do quick calculations within the field as well. And so this keypad calculator widget was one of the most complex features in the app and took many weeks to get it working correctly. But in terms of the actual components within this component, it's pretty simple. It's just a bunch of QButton components arranged by using Quasar's grid system using rows and columns. So I'll just show you this widget working. So we can use it as a standard numeric keypad by just typing in a number and tapping OK. And we can also use these calculator buttons as well. So we could do a division like this, divided by 2, and we see the result. Tap OK. And we can also do multiplication and subtraction and addition as well. And we can also backspace on these numbers or clear the field completely, or we can cancel what we've just been doing entirely. So this is quite a complex component, and on the desktop version, which I'll show you a little bit later, we can also control this widget using the keyboard as well. So for example, if we tap the asterisk button on our keyboard, our real keyboard, then it will actually trigger this multiplication button on the widget. And I'll show you that a little bit later on. Okay, so that's the amount field, and next we have the date field. So if we tap on this date button here, we can see this calendar pop up, which is just the QDate component. And this is basically just the bog standard component, although I've customized the colors of the buttons, and I've also added this today button, which we can tap to select today's date. And we can then see the selected date here, and we can clear that date, or we can choose a different date, and we always see that here. And finally, we have this edit button over on the right, and if we tap that, we see another QDialog pop up, which allows us to edit more options related to this entry. So again, right at the top, we can still edit the name/category field, and we can still edit the amount field. And you'll see, we see the calculator keypad pop up again, but this time it's actually popping up within this dialog rather than right at the bottom of the app. So that's one of the reasons why this component was so complicated, because it needs to be displayed in different places depending on where we are within the app. And also in this pop-up, we have this notes field. So we can tap in a little note in there related to this entry. And if I just tap OK on that, we can see the note underneath the entry name here on the main entries page as well. And then we have another date field, which just gives us another way of selecting a date for this field. So the same as this one here. And then we have a reminder field where the user can set a reminder where they'll receive a notification at a particular date and time. And if we tap on that, we can see this custom component I've created here, which combines a QDate component for selecting the date and this custom time component where we can select the hour and the minutes. And I've added this time component like this using these select boxes because I'm not really a big fan of the QTime component, which comes with Quasar. So I'll just jump to the Quasar site to show you that. And components and form components and time picker. So we do have this time picker with Quasar, but I'm just not a big fan of it. I think it's kind of a messy way to choose the time. So I thought it'd be better to have these drop downs. And also I wanted the user to be able to select both the date and the time in one screen or in one pop-up like we have here. And if we tap OK on that, we can see the date and time of the reminder here. We can delete the reminder if we want. And if I just OK that, we can see we have a little bell icon here on the entry so that the user can see that this entry has a reminder set. And next in this pop-up, we have this partial expenses section where the user can add partial expenses towards the amount that they've budgeted. So let's say this entry was actually gas and not dentist. I'll just change that to gas. And let's say they want to spend $400 a month on gas. Then every time they go and buy gas, they can add a partial expense here. I'll just give it a name. Let's say they spend $100. then they can always see how much they've actually spent compared to the amount that they've budgeted. And this way they can see if they've gone over budget. As we have here. And if they do go over budget, once the app is finished, I'll probably add some kind of indication here on the main entries page to show that they've gone over budget. Although at this point, I'm not sure how that's going to look exactly. And then finally in this pop-up, we just have some options at the bottom. Move, copy, paid, start, and delete. And paid is working, just like it is on this swipe to reveal options. And delete is working, which we can see there. Okay, so let's take a look at the options drawer on this entries page. So if we tap on this button up here, we can see this drawer. And again, we have a select multiple items option, which will make these checkboxes appear so that we can select multiple items. And then we can copy them, move them, mark them all as paid, star them all, or delete them all. Although right now, none of these buttons are actually working. And then next in this drawer, we have reorder items again. So again, the user can drag these little handles to reorder their items. And then we have this add carryover button, which will allow the user to carry over the overall balance from a different budget. So for example, let's say this was the April budget that we're looking at now. We might want to carry over the final balance from March to this budget. So we would choose March and tap OK. And this carryover would then appear at the top of the budget. Although I don't actually have that appearing just yet. And next we have add starred items, which would allow us to add all of our starred items to this budget, although that's not doing anything yet. Then we have charts. And we see this chart appear in this pop-up. And this is using all of the same data which this main entries page is using. And I'm creating these charts using ChartJS. And in Fudget 1, the colors of the segments in this chart were just random. So this didn't look very pretty. But this time I wanted to make it look a bit better. So this time we have a bit of a theme with the colors. So the largest expense has this deep red color. Then we have some lighter reds, some oranges and yellows. And then for the smallest expenses, we have these green colors. And for this table down at the bottom here, I'm using a QTable component, which has the option to sort these by category or sort them by amount, ascending or descending, or by percentage as well. And we have this option at the bottom here, group smaller items into other. So we have this chunk here where it's grouping all of the smaller items into this one chunk. But if we untick that, then we can see all of the individual smaller expenses. And if we tap on a slice in our pie chart, we can see the corresponding row being highlighted down here as well. And likewise, if we tap one of these rows, we can see the corresponding slice being highlighted on the chart as well. And we can also delete items in this chart as well by tapping this little delete icon. And as well as the expenses chart, we also have an income chart as well for all of our income items. Okay, let's close this chart and jump back to the drawer. And so we have a bunch of options here for exporting a budget, printing a budget, sorting a budget, and editing a budget, although these aren't doing anything yet. And then we have a bunch of checkboxes. So we have this show search and filter bar button, which will show this search and filter widget at the top here. So what we'll be able to do is type in a phrase here, and it will filter all of our entries by that phrase, although that's currently not working at the moment. And we also have this filter. We tap on filter. Then we can filter our items by whether they're an income or an expense, or whether they're paid or unpaid, or whether they're starred or unstarred. And we can see these little QChip components appear here, showing us the current filters. And we can remove these by just tapping on the little X's. And we can hide this widget by just tapping this little arrow button here. And next we have the show running balance. If we tick that, then you can now see this running balance running down the page in this little green section at the bottom of each item. And this running balance is basically a computed getter in my store. We can see that here. And so this is just an array of numbers. And what it's basically doing is looping through the entries working out the current running balance and pushing that running balance to the array. And then I'm just spitting out the corresponding running balance by using the index of the current entry. And finally, in the drawer, we have the show date column checkbox. If we untick that, we can see the date column disappear. And we also have this show notes option. So that refers to these little notes which appear in gray here. So if we untick that, then we see that little note disappear. And finally, we have this auto sort option, which isn't actually doing anything now. But this will eventually allow us to automatically sort all of our entries by a particular criteria, such as the date of the item or something like that. Okay, so finally in our entries page, we have the add income and add expense buttons at the bottom here, which we can use to add a new entry. So I'm just going to tap on add expense. And you can see it's added a new expense and it's automatically focused the name or category field. And we also have some autocomplete here on these fields so that users don't need to keep typing in the same names over and over again. So if I just type in B, then we can see the autocomplete widget appear and we can see bills. And if I tap on that, then it will fill in the name field for us. And we can then just add our amount field and do any calculations if we want to. So that's it for the entries page. If there's anything you've seen so far that you would like to see a tutorial on, please make sure you leave a comment below, letting me know exactly what you would like to see a tutorial on. Okay, let's jump to the starred page. So I'll tap on starred down here. And you can see the starred page basically looks the same as the entries page. We see a list of entries, and starred entries are basically entries that we want to add to every budget or almost every budget that we create. So let's say, for example, you were using Fudget to budget monthly and you were creating a budget for each month. You would probably have a bunch of income and expense items which you would want to add to every single budget, such as your salary and your mobile phone bill, etc. And so instead of manually creating those entries every time you create a new monthly budget, you could just add those entries to your starred entries, and those entries could be automatically added to a monthly budget every time you create a new budget. And in terms of adding items to the starred section, all we need to do is swipe left on an entry and tap star, or we could also choose star from this edit pop-up as well. And that entry would then be added to this starred list. And then when we create a new budget on the budgets page here, we can basically just tick this add starred items checkbox and it'll add all of those starred items to our new budget. But other than that, the starred section is basically the same as the entries page. So we can add income and expense items, we can tap and hold to reorder, we can multiple select, and it all works in basically the same way. Okay, so let's jump to the settings page. When we jump to the settings page, we can see a bunch of different settings categories here. We can tap on a category to open some settings for that category. And all of these settings, categories, and settings are coming from my store, from basically a big state property. So if I just jump to my settings store, we can see all of the different sections here, like account and appearance, account and appearance. And then within each section, we have the fields. And I've basically set up components for each type of field. So a component for a simple item field like these ones, and then a component for a drop down like these ones, etc. And if you want to learn more about how I created this settings section and how I'm generating all of these fields based on this state property, then check out video number 4 in this series. And I won't go through all of these options, but if we go to the appearance section, then we can change the language. So I'll change that to French, and you can see all of the fields have updated. So I'm going to have a bunch of different languages in this app so that it can hopefully reach a lot more people. And we also have a bunch of themes. And you can see if we choose a different theme, then all of the colors change instantly. We can also adjust the text size, which is something that a lot of users were requesting. The text size was too small in Fudget 1 for some people, but we can now easily change the text size throughout the app. We can also swipe right as well to go back to the main settings section, as well as tapping this settings option in the header. And I'll just jump to the help section, and we have this ask a question section, which I spoke about in a previous video in this series, where the user can enter a phrase and we'll show a bunch of questions related to that phrase, and then the user can tap on a question and see the answer here, or they can just choose a question from this list down below and again see the answer here. And again, check out my earlier videos in this series if you want to see how I created this section. Okay, that's about it for the settings section. Let's jump into the account section. So when we jump to the account page, we see this login to Fudget Plus page. So what is Fudget Plus? Well, it's basically the pro or subscription option of Fudget 2, which gives users live data sync across devices, as well as a bunch of extra features like the calculator buttons we saw before, the ability to export a budget, themes, and a bunch of other features as well. And so if the user already has a Fudget Plus account, they can just log into it here, or otherwise they can tap on this Learn About Fudget Plus button to see the pricing page. So I'll tap on that, and I'm extremely proud of this page here. It's probably the most beautiful part of the app. Previously I just had a really simple pricing page. I'll show you that in the sketch design here. So this one in the middle here, this is what it looked like before. We just had a title, some bullet points, and then basically 2 pricing buttons. But then I saw a video on the App Masters channel, which is a channel I'd recommend that you check out, especially if you want to learn about how to make more money from your apps and stuff like that. And on that video, Steve was basically saying that longer pricing pages such as this one, which have some bullet points, some social proof, a features table, some testimonials, and some FAQs, that pricing pages like this convert a lot more users than these simple one-page pricing pages like I had before. So that's why I completely redid this page from scratch and created this much longer page that we see here. So first of all, we have this parallax header component right at the top, which I've created using the QParallax component. And if you look at these coins in the background, you'll see that they slowly drop down as we scroll down the page. And we also have these clouds behind the logo here, and they slowly slide down as well, a little bit faster than the coins. And you can also see that the whole of this div gets darker as well as we scroll down, and this little X in the corner slowly fades out as well as we scroll down the page. So that's all done using the QParallax component. And next we have the pricing buttons. So we have options for 12 months, 6 months, and 1 month. And almost everybody who subscribes will go for the 12 months option. And really the only reason we have these 6 month and 1 month options here is to just make the 12-month option look like better value. It's just kind of an old marketing trick which leads to more people subscribing or buying whatever it is that you're offering. And then after the pricing buttons, we have some bullet points which lists the main benefits of the app. So it works on all your devices. You can budget together with a partner or a friend. You have no limits, and you have a bunch of amazing tools such as the calculator, export, print, sort, notes, reminders, and themes. And next we have another little parallax kind of widget. So we have this little square here, which is empty to begin with. And as we scroll down, we can see a sentence appear saying over 2 million people have saved money with Fudget. And if we scroll down a bit further, then we see the average rating of the app on the App Store. So this is just to add a little bit of social proof, because people are much more likely to spend money on something that other people are spending money on as well, and that other people rate highly as well. And then next we have a features table, which makes it really clear exactly what the user gets with a basic Fudget account versus a Fudget Plus account. So we can clearly see exactly what we're getting extra with the Fudget Plus account. And I've created this using the QMarkupTable component, and the QMarkupTable component is like the QTable component, except it doesn't have all of the extra features that we don't need here, such as sorting and filtering and all that stuff. So if you have a really simple table like this where you're not going to actually be sorting or filtering, then it's best to use the QMarkupTable. And next we have some success stories, and this is basically just a horizontal QScroll area which allows us to scroll through all of these testimonials, and these are all real reviews from the App Store from the current version of Fudget. And next we're just repeating the pricing buttons again, and by the way, these buttons are just QButton components, although they're highly customized with lots of stuff being displayed within the QButton component. And finally, we just have some frequently asked questions, and these are basically to tell the user that they can easily get a refund and stuff like that. And I've done this using the QExpansion component, using the accordion mode so that we can only open one item at a time. And finally, we just have these two buttons at the bottom, Try Fudget Plus and the No Thanks button. And you'll notice these buttons are always docked to the bottom wherever we are on this pop-up here. We want to keep this button, especially the Try Fudget Plus button, visible as much as possible, which is why I've docked this to the bottom. And you'll notice that the No Thanks button is much smaller because ideally we want them to click on the Try Fudget Plus button. And if they do tap on that, then we can see this little loading screen, which I've done using the loading plugin. And they then see a new page where they can create their account. So they can enter an email address and a password and then create their Fudget Plus account. And once they've created an account and they're signed in, then whenever they go back to the account page, they'll see this kind of account summary page, which tells them what plan they're on and on exactly which date their subscription will renew. So that's basically the entire front end of Fudget 2, at least how it looks on a mobile device. So before we wrap up, let's just take a quick look at the desktop version. Okay, let's take a look at the desktop version of Fudget 2. We can see the Mac version running here. And one of the main differences is that we have the navigation over on the left here, instead of down at the bottom like we have on the mobile app. And this is basically just a QDraw component. And I've just added a little bit of style to remove any background color from it. And also on the desktop app, we have this nice gradient background going from the top left to the bottom right corner. And we can see that more clearly if we full screen it. And you can see this gradient change when we change the theme as well. I'll just change that back and shrink this down again. So back to the budgets page. So the main difference here is that we can see the list of budgets over on the left and the list of entries within that budget over on the right at the same time, whereas on the mobile version we have two separate screens for that. But otherwise the budget section is basically the same, so we can still click and drag to reorder items. We can still select multiple items. We can still enable this reorder items mode as well. We can add a folder and open that folder and add budgets within that folder. And we still have the all budgets balance widget down at the bottom as well. And we can also still swipe to reveal options on these items, just like on mobile. However, this is a little bit fiddly on desktop and not very intuitive. So I've also added the ability to right click on a budget to show these options as well, and then right click again to hide these options. And I've done that by using the context menu event, which we can use in Vue apps. Okay, so let's have a look at the entries page. And again, it's mostly the same as the mobile version, but we do have a couple of little differences. So for example, if I jump into a name field, just type in the letter S. Again, we can see our autocomplete widget, but on desktop, we can actually control this using the keyboard. So if I tap down, we can go down and up on these items, and we can hit enter to choose one of these options. And also the amount fields are a little bit different on desktop as well. If we click into an amount field, you'll notice that we don't see a calculator widget by default. Instead, this is just acting like a normal input field and selecting the amount, and we can type into that field and hit enter. But if we want to show the calculator, then we can tap on this calculator button, which will pop it up down here. And we can then use the calculator. And once the calculator is showing, we can also control this calculator using the keyboard as well. So if I tap the / key on my keyboard, you'll see that triggers the division operator. And then if I type in another number, say 12, and hit enter, then it will do that calculation for us. So we can show the calculator by tapping this little calculator button, or we can show it by just pressing an operator on our keyboard. So for example, if I just press the minus key on my keyboard, then it triggers the calculator widget to appear, and we can see the minus symbol as well. And we can then carry on using the calculator, either using the keyboard or by clicking on the calculator here. Okay, so the start section is basically the same as it is on mobile. There's nothing really to show you here. The settings section is a little bit different. We can now see the settings categories and the individual category settings on the screen at the same time, whereas on mobile we have to click through like this. And I talked about how I achieved the different layouts for desktop and mobile in one of the previous videos in this series as well. And the account section is basically the same as it is on mobile, except the pricing pop-up is displayed within this smaller pop-up like this, because I found it really difficult to make this section look big in a full screen pop-up. I think it just looks a lot better in this little narrow kind of pop-up. And that's about it for all of the differences on the desktop app. And remember, if you want to see a tutorial about any of the features in this app, then make sure you leave a comment below. And the most requested tutorials will have some videos made about them. Or if you have any questions about this app, then please leave those questions below. Hopefully this video has helped you to see what's possible with Quasar. There are really no limits to the kind of apps that you can create with this amazing framework. And so I've been working on this app for almost a year now, and I'm getting to the point where I'm struggling to keep working on it. So I'm going to take a little bit of time off from it, maybe a month or two, where I'm just going to create some videos for you guys. And then in the new year, I'm going to jump on the back end for this app, which I'm going to create using the Firebase real-time database. And I'll get the app fully functioning as a real app and hopefully publish it sometime early next year. Please hover over my face and click subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.